What's up, everyone? My name is Ale. Welcome back to my world of stocks. So, as you've probably noticed lately, I've been talking a little bit more about, I would say, riskier, maybe even more speculative type of stocks. And I think it might be time to kind of remind you guys that at my core, I am still a much more rational, long term minded investor above everything else. So, in today's video, we're going to talk about three stocks in my portfolio that I honestly do not foresee ever selling, at least not until I retire or if I need the money for some other kind of huge investment. But overall, these three stocks are some of my absolute favorite stocks to own. I think that they are three of the most reliable stocks in my entire portfolio in terms of long-term confidence that they will not lose me any money, but instead actually make me money. And I think that they are some great building blocks for both beginners and even experienced investors alike to even build their entire portfolios around. These are great, solid, core foundational stocks that I love. And that's what we're going to talk about in today's video. We're going to run through these. Let me know if there are any in your portfolio, and maybe I'll talk about them in a future video and title it something like stocks that my viewers will never sell or something like that. So drop those comments down there, hit the like button if you enjoy this, but let's go ahead and run through these three stocks. We're going to count down from 3 down to 1, and it'll be in kind of the order of like least favorite to most favorite from 3 down to 1. And starting things off here with number 3, that's going to be Apple, ticker symbol AAPL. And this might be a little bit of a surprise to some of you because for the longest time, I was not even an investor in Apple, but recently I really changed my mind about owning it and I decided to finally start investing in the stock, which I'm currently only up about 15% on my overall position since I only recently started buying it, despite the overall stock being up over 400% in the past 5 years. I really should have gotten in a lot earlier on this one. But the more I think about Apple, the more I'm convinced that this is a stock that I not only will be holding onto super long term, but that I will also look for more buying opportunities on future dips. And there are several reasons for that. Probably the biggest of which is that Apple has one of the absolute most sticky businesses I've ever seen. And when you talk about reliable long term stocks, one of the most important components of that is how sticky the business is, meaning how likely their customers are to stay with the company and keep buying their products and services. And when it comes to Apple, I mean, it doesn't get much stickier than this, guys. They really get you in with even just one device, and then they can sell you a bunch more with all the services that come with them. And then you end up getting hooked onto the entire ecosystem and never wanting to leave. I myself am actually switching over from Android to Apple right now, and I've always been kind of an Apple hater, but I'm finally switching just because I really think that Apple is much more efficient in the entire ecosystem. And to be honest, I also really want an Apple Watch because Android smartwatches suck. I mean, I've always had horrible experiences with them. But if I want to use the Apple Watch, I have to adopt the whole ecosystem and switch over to iPhone because, at least to my knowledge, Apple Watches don't really work with Android. So you can see how this just really ends up snowballing and turning into me having to buy a bunch of Apple products and adopting the entire ecosystem. And to be honest, in the future, I'll even consider buying a new tablet with Apple, a computer, maybe even headphones, just because everything syncs so well together. Which, by the way, I'm sure I'll be even upgrading some of those down the line too and adding on a bunch of services as well. I mean, Apple literally just announced their new iPhone 13 and Apple Watch Series 7, and despite both of those being very minor refreshes of last year's products, I've already been seeing tons of family and friends posting on social media that they can't wait to upgrade. And this type of mentality among Apple users is what I think will keep raking in giant amounts of money for Apple well into the future. I mean, one friend told me that he's literally upgrading to the iPhone 13 Pro just because it's going to finally have 120 hertz refresh rate, which is basically the only new feature worth mentioning, at least in my opinion. And then another friend told me that he's upgrading his Apple Watch just because the bezels are thinner on the new one, despite the watch literally using the same processor as last year and having the same overall design other than the bezels, which I admit the bezels are actually a big deal. I think that it is nice that they're getting much thinner, but they could have at least put in a new processor if you're going to drop another $400 plus just to upgrade. But you can see how Apple does this. I mean, they make just very minor, kind of changes. It doesn't really cost them much, and they get to charge you hundreds of dollars for it. And even Apple themselves predict that the new products will sell extremely well this year. In fact, They ramped up production for the iPhone 13 from the usual 75 million to a massive 90 million units this year. Because of all this, Apple continues to rake in gigantic sales and profits year after year. I mean, by next year, they're going to be approaching $400 billion in sales, which is just insane to think about. Now, granted, their business can be cyclical, so you could even see a down year when there's not maybe a big upgrade in their iPhones and there's not a lot of hype surrounding them. But there's other times when sales can absolutely skyrocket, like over a 30% jump this fiscal year. So it's kind of hard to predict. Meanwhile, their diversification into other products and high margin services has helped them achieve almost $100 billion of free cash flow in just the past year alone, which, by the way, was also growth of over 30% year over year. With that money, they're not only able to buy back stock, but they also pay a small but high growth dividend with a nearly double-digit growth rate, a decade of consecutive growth, and only a tiny payout ratio of just 15%. I mean, I can tell you right now with absolute certainty that this dividend is not going to disappear and it will only get much larger over time. But perhaps the biggest benefit of all is that they get to continuously strengthen their balance sheet that usually holds over $200 billion in just cash and marketable securities, which is something that Apple desperately tries to spend as much as possible. I mean, for example, they regularly increase their capital expenditures, and recently they even approved another nearly $100 billion of stock buybacks. They even get to invest extremely heavy into any kind of new market opportunities whenever they want. Like, for example, we've been seeing with the new Apple electric autonomous vehicle rumors that keep coming out. Point being, sure, Apple's growth can be cyclical, the stock can sometimes be a bit volatile, but they're so massively large with so much cash on hand that as soon as they decide to go after another market and basically dominate it and integrate whatever it is into their already super sticky ecosystem of products and services, well, the stock is almost certainly going to react positively long term every time that they decide to do those kinds of things. I just think this is one of the best long-term stocks out there. And even if the stock is volatile, in my opinion, those are buying opportunities whenever it dips. So this is a stock that I do not intend on selling out of my position anytime soon. Okay, moving on to stock number 2. That's going to be the absolutely massive and largest e-commerce player in the entire world in Amazon, ticker symbol AMZN. And this is a stock that I'm currently up over 100% on, but that's actually nowhere near as good as what the stock has done in general, as it has now soared by over 300% in just the past 5 years alone. Still, I have absolutely no intention of selling the stock, and in fact, I've even been thinking about buying more of it even at today's super high levels. That's because Amazon already dominates many markets and yet is still growing like a much younger company, especially on the bottom line. When looking at it, Amazon already commands more than 40% of the US e-commerce market, with the next closest being two giants in Walmart and eBay, but at only 7% and 4% respectively. And yet not only does Amazon still have a ton of room to expand there, especially in certain segments like auto parts and grocery and more, but when looking at their total sales next year, they're expected to surpass over $500 billion with a T, $500 billion in sales, and yet they're still growing at around 20% a year. That is so crazy to think about. This is just what they do. They're like a giant octopus spreading their tentacles everywhere and dominating everything they touch. They've already created their own logistics infrastructure with over 400,000 drivers and plans to add another 100,000 electric delivery vehicles, while having already expanded to over 100 giant fulfillment centers around the country and about 200 around the world. They have the second most market share in video streaming, only behind Netflix, and the most cloud computing market share in the entire world at over 30%, which is huge. It's one of the most important markets ever in the entire world. Speaking of which, AWS only makes up around 12% of Amazon's sales, yet they bring in more than half of all of Amazon's operating profit. It's, very nice margins on that. And speaking of profits, whenever Amazon chooses to be profitable instead of reinvesting all of their money into growing the business even more, you typically see huge growth spurts on their bottom line of even hundreds of percents at times. So yeah, their valuation is expensive with a forward P ratio of 48, but that's only because Amazon chooses to not be as profitable as they otherwise could be. In fact, when you look a little further out into the future on a 5-year basis, their PEG ratio is only less than 1.5, which is pretty darn reasonable. That's much cheaper than even a lot of garbage companies out there that are only a fraction of the size of Amazon and are nowhere near as diversified or as dominant or as reliable. I mean, I really think that in a lot of ways you could argue that Amazon stock is actually manipulated by themselves to look more expensive than it really is, just because of the nature of how they do business and how ambitious and dominant they try to be, which does keep their profits lower than it otherwise would be if they focus more on profitability. And I know that there's ethical concerns about that, and the same can be said about Apple and other giant corporations and the way they do business and monopolize and take over everything. And I don't even disagree with those concerns, but just from a purely investing standpoint, I mean, I cannot understand why anyone would not want to own the stock just from an investing standpoint. I'm not saying ethical, I'm saying investing. I mean, I know that there's people out there that just have never wanted to own Amazon stock because they think it's too expensive or whatever. Nothing against them, to each their own, but I've never been able to understand their rationality. I really think Amazon is a stock that could and probably should be owned by everyone, and it's a stock that I'm going to hold well into retirement. It's one of my absolute favorites. I've got no intentions of selling out of this one. I mean, I really just think that they're just going to keep getting bigger and bigger. I don't see anyone dethroning them or stopping them. All right, guys, finishing up here with stock number 1. That's going to be my personal favorite of the entire bunch and also of my entire portfolio. And you guys probably can guess what this one is. It is, of course, Microsoft, ticker symbol MSFT, who is one of the world leaders in just about everything. You're talking by far the most desktop computer operating system market share in the world at over 76% with Windows. They have close to 90% of the office productivity market with Microsoft Office in what is essentially a duopoly with Google, but even then, Microsoft just completely dominates it. And by the way, one of the reasons why Office is so popular is thanks to Office 365 that utilizes the cloud, which Microsoft also controls the second most market share in the world, only behind Amazon with Microsoft Azure, which by the way is even growing faster than Amazon as well. And because of the global health issue, they even saw their video conferencing services grow to almost 10% market share last year, and then even more at almost 15% this year as well. They even became the most used platform in over 40 countries, with the second most market share as a percentage of countries, only slightly behind Zoom. That's pretty crazy. Meanwhile, Azure is only making Microsoft one of the absolute best plays on the future of artificial intelligence with various machine learning and deep learning capabilities and platforms. And as if all of those things weren't enough, Microsoft is even a leader in gaming with the 4th most market share and huge potential to become the Netflix of gaming thanks to Xbox Game Pass, which is a subscription-like service for video games. Thanks to all of this dominance, Microsoft has become one of the most financially impressive companies in the entire world with over $150 billion in sales, and yet they consistently grow those sales by a double-digit percentage every single year. And just as impressive is the insane profitability they command with over $60 billion of net income just last year alone. That is crazy profitability, all of which is used to make blockbuster acquisitions like the ones they made for LinkedIn and GitHub, both of which have been monumental successes as they continue to grow by huge amounts every year, as well as a giant shopping spree for video game companies to strengthen their Xbox segment, including a huge one in Bethesda. And all the meanwhile, they continue to strengthen their balance sheet and pay a nice growing dividend that are both similar to Apple. You're talking over $130 billion in cash and equivalents and a small dividend yield of only less than 1%, but some very nice growth metrics on it, which I highly doubt will ever get cut anytime soon either. I'm personally up over 150% on my position, and I would actually be up a lot more if I wasn't continuously adding to it, which does raise my cost basis. But I gotta say, not only do I have absolutely no plans of selling this stock anytime soon, but it's one that I will continue to buy on any dips, which is admittedly super rare because this is one of the most reliable and uptrending stocks in the entire market that rarely ever dips. But if you're able to catch it on a broader kind of market pullback or anything like that, I would be all over that if I was you. Anyway, that does it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. What are some stocks that you would never sell? Let me know down in the comment section. I want to make a video about what stocks my viewers refuse to sell, and I may even do some more about some other stocks that I also think I'm just going to keep holding very long term. So we could do some more videos like this. Just let me know down below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed the video. Thanks again for stopping by. Appreciate all the support. Hope you're all doing well. Take care. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.